You're listening to All Things Real Estate on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN. Once again, here's your hosts, Gary Kelley and Brad Avergon.
Welcome back to the second half of the show. I'm Gary Kelley, and I'm joined by Brad Avergon. And Brad was telling us how many years of experience he had, which made him sound like, I don't know, 34 years. Have you been a loan officer for 34 years? Because you were also at one point on the dark side. You were a real estate agent.
I was a real estate agent. That's actually how I got started, Gary. I got started in the business, and I learned a new appreciation for what you guys do. I come from a financial background. I went to business school and such, and so my brain tends to be wired pretty linearly. And so I was finding myself out there with folks, and they were having trouble with colors of homes or colors of shutters and things like that. I'm like, the house is such a great deal. This is how the numbers work. You got to buy it. And so I found my true calling going into real estate financing. But I definitely have.
That's one of the things I tend to be able to look at a house and say things like colors can always change. My colleague Sue's able to go into a house and say, well, if you do this color, it's going to make it feel larger. And if you she'll talk about knocking this wall down or making this a lattice or something like that. And I'm kind of like, Sue, that's interesting, but the house. And that's why we get along. She used to say all kinds of things that were kind of had a zing to them. Beauty and the Beast, things like that. And I've decided that we're going to describe ourselves as milk and cookies. Great apart, but better together.
I love that. That's awesome. What a great slogan.
So I haven't gotten to the point of putting it on business cards yet. That could come though. How do you feel about people, waiving their contingencies? I mean, the contingencies really that you get into are inspection items, but also waiving the appraisal. I don't know how you can waive an appraisal if you're getting a mortgage.
Well, that's, it's interesting. There are some, so as a loan officer, when we run a loan through underwriting, through an underwriting model, depending on the loan to value and the purchase price and many factors, the borrower's credit profile, sometimes the property can get what's called a property inspection waiver or a PIW. But there's really no guarantee. It's
based on an appraisal, not the home inspection.
It is, it has nothing to do with the home inspection. So this is about waiving the appraisal. But when people ask me, and I've been getting that question a lot recently, can I waive my appraisal? Can I waive my appraisal? And my answer is, you really, you first of all, as a banker, until we run that loan through the system, I can't tell you that we're not going to require an appraisal. Okay, we have to run that property address through. We have to trigger what's called trigger the loan and send out disclosures and everything like that. You need to have an agreement going forward, and then we'll know for sure if we're going to need an appraisal or we're not going to need an appraisal. Now, a lot of people saying, well, can I waive my appraisal? Can I waive my mortgage contingency? Can I waive all these things, Brad? You've done your job. Well, yes, I have done my job, but at the end of the day, there's an underwriter that's going to actually approve that loan. They're going to pull in the appraisal if one's required. They're going to pull in your other documents, and they're going to actually approve the loan. I don't have the authority to do that, nor do most loan officers. So the question is, what are you willing to risk? If you have the cash to back you up, or a very rich relative that's willing to kind of bail you out should you need to, or you're willing to risk your deposit, sure, you can waive your mortgage contingency or waive your appraisal. But other than that, you really need to think very, very carefully. And I don't typically recommend that they do that. I'm happy to talk to a listing agent and say, listen, these borrowers are very strong, but their mortgage contingency is a really key piece of protection for a buyer.
Yeah, I feel somewhat similarly on the home inspection, which I get is different. A lot of people now say, oh, we're going to waive the home inspection. Now, if I'm a listing agent, what I'm hearing when they say that is, oh, we're not going to have to renegotiate once we've done the inspection. A lot of times offers will come in and they'll say, this is an informational only inspection. And when the buyers find out that there are things that need attention on the house, inevitably they come back and they try to renegotiate, no matter what the offer says. And that's where it's just awkward, because the seller doesn't want to hear that. Frankly, the agents don't want to hear that. And so one of the things that we're seeing people do now is do an inspection after the purchase and sale is signed. Okay, so the deal's, hard in that sense, and we're waiting for the financing. And then they'll do the inspection then, so that they know what to do. If, on the other hand, they find something major wrong, what do you think they're going to do, Brad?
They're going to try to renegotiate, I would imagine.
They're going to try to renegotiate, or they're going to go out and buy a new car and get turned down on a mortgage. and then the deal falls apart. But the reason I say that is, I want people buying a house, whether I'm the listing agent or a buyer's agent, I want people to understand what they're buying. And if they're comfortable making that determination that they don't want to have an inspection because that's going to telegraph to the seller their intent, I'm okay with that. But I want to make sure that they understand all the things that they're possibly going to have an issue with. And then, frankly, I'll go down the path of saying, maybe you should consider a home warranty. Okay, something that will help to mitigate some of the costs. It doesn't it just doesn't cover things. It will help mitigate some of the costs if something has to happen. So if it's the middle of winter, I know it's getting to be summer, but if it's the middle of winter and the air conditioning doesn't work, okay, you can't test it really in the winter. We get that. But what are we going to do now? As it's summer and it's starting to heat up and the air conditioning still doesn't work. Lots of issues around those kinds of things. And frankly, a home warranty will help with some of that.
So if I understand correctly, Gary, a home warranty is nothing more than an insurance policy based on certain major appliances in a home. It's got a deductible and things like that. And it's good for anywhere from 1 to 3 years or 5 years, depending on how much you're willing to pay for it.
Yeah, that's basically it. The ones that I have the ability to easily put on as a part of a transaction are 1 year. And then that company at the end of the year will certainly come back and try to get you to re-up for a longer time frame. It gives you a little peace of mind.
I think it's a great idea. Again, we're in a very competitive market, and I hear, as I'm sure you do as well, when you're working on the buyer side, the frustration sometimes of not having their offer accepted. They're going on above and beyond asking price, and they're saying, why aren't we getting these houses? It's crazy. And after having that happen a few times, they can get frustrated. And so one of the things I do is I do counsel the buyers early on. I said, listen, unless you get extremely lucky, which can happen, but doesn't usually, this is probably not going to be a Surrey ride. It's going to be a little bit of a bumpy ride along the way. You're going to have to probably, make offers above and beyond asking, and you have to get comfortable with that, and you have to be able to move quickly. Gary, I have a question for you. So when you get these offers, you get multiple offers in on a property, and let's say somebody is waiving the home inspection contingency. How do you know on the other side that the buyer is of the mindset that you just described, that they're aware that they're not going to be coming back to the negotiation table? How do you do that?
You talk to the agent on the other side, and you say, hey, listen, I with all due respect, I see that the inspection's waived. Does that really mean the inspection's waived? Okay. I had one recently where we accepted an offer on a house, signed the offer, and the very next day, the buyer's agent said, we are going to want to have an inspection. Well, hold it. We accepted an offer that said no inspection. So magically, some words got added to the purchase and sale that said, when you do your inspection, which by the way will be after the purchase and sale, it will not be used as an opportunity to come back and renegotiate price or get out of the deal for any reason, because that's not the intent. So, that leads to another one of the points, and that's all of this stuff we're talking about needs to be in writing. It absolutely needs to be there. So if someone is coming in saying, we rent, we have nothing to sell. Well, you need to make sure that that's written down in the offer or perhaps on the pre-approval so that you know that that indeed is something you can count on. Too often people, get into these deals and all of a sudden you find out, well, we don't have something to sell, but we have to wait for our house to close before we have the money to go forward. So were they lying? No. Were they perhaps stretching the situation a bit? Yeah, maybe. But you really want to understand all of those details before going forward.
It's so important, Gary. I must echo what you're saying, because I recently had a transaction where a buyer was trying to buy a property, and they needed the proceeds from the sale of their current home, not only to close, but they needed it for the P&S deposit. And they didn't understand that they were going to have to show up with 5%, of the purchase price 2 weeks into the transaction, and they didn't have it. And so we had to have that long, serious conversation as to how you're going to do this. And in the end, they ended up not going through with it because they weren't in a position to be able to do that. And
so Brad, if someone wants to reach out to you for your wise sage advice, how do they reach you?
Best way to reach me, Gary, is via my cell phone, which is 978-375-5531, or via email at bavergon@envisionbank.com. How about you, Gary? How do they reach you?
I'm at 508-733-6005, and I am Gary at movewithgary.com. Brad, as always, great show. Thanks for participating. Any final words to our listeners?
Yes. Go with a good team. Go with people like you and Sue, who have the experience to guide whether you're selling or buying.
You too, Brad. You're part of the team.
Oh, thanks, Gary.
All right, everyone. Talk to you again next month.
You've been listening to All Things Real Estate on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN.